The Great Central, the last main line into London. Amalgamated into the LNER at the grouping, it came under London Midland control in 1958. Had links with the GWR at Banbury and a joint line bar High Wycombe, and even saw Southern Green with through trains from the north east to the south coast. This is the story of the last years of steam on GC Metals, from the terminus at Marylebone to the Midland city of Nottingham, plus some of its connections along the way. Nottingham Victoria was a monumental feat of construction. Over 500,000 cubic yards of sandstone was excavated to accommodate it. It was opened a year after the mainline services to London had started, on the 24th of May 1900. There was a covered carriage approach in Milton Street, through which is seen the frontage of the Victoria Hotel. A dominant feature was the 120-foot high clock tower. We begin at Marylebone, opened in 1899. The outside also had a covered carriageway entrance and was opposite the Hotel Great Central, which became the British Railways headquarters, 222 Marylebone Road. The station had 4 platform faces and a cab rank roadway between numbers 1 and 2. A servicing point with 70-foot vacuum turntable and water facilities was situated on the downside beyond Rossmore Road Bridge. Once coal was available also. This is Black 544984 of Colwickshed, Nottingham. She would haul the last down train on September the 3rd, 1966, when the through route closed. In the last days of the semi-fast from Nottingham, Black 5s with a normal motive power. Banbury's 44872 leaves the servicing point to back down to the terminus. Behind the engine is the wall of the taxicab road from Rossmore Road to the platforms. Waiting to depart platform 3 is 44984 under the overall roof of this modest terminus. Reconstruction in the early 1990s has now changed the station. The right-of-way is given and our journey north begins, out under Rossmore Road and a glimpse of the servicing point. The retaining wall on the right was where extensive goods sidings were situated, all now gone, replaced by a GLC housing estate. The DMU heads down to the terminus past the carriage sidings, latterly used as a DMU stabling point. The train will soon go under Lodge Road and then St John's Wood Road to enter the tunnel under Lord's Cricket Ground. The GC ran as a joint line with the Metropolitan Railway through the London suburbs, passing Harrow on the Hill. Rickmansworth was on a curve requiring a 25 mph speed restriction. The electrified tracks were left behind beyond Amersham, and GC trains were now in open Buckinghamshire countryside on the climb over the Chilterns en route to Aylesbury. Arriving there on the 11th of August 1966 along platform 3 is 45267. We're now 38 miles from Marylebone, and it was customary for engines stopping here to take water. Arriving next at the county town is Tyseley's 45292. There appears to be some passenger traffic for the train, along with a trolley full of parcels. As was usual at this time, enthusiasts detrain to watch the end of platform activities, and we will also leave on this train northwards. leaving, we noticed the two-road ex-GWR shed which closed in 1962 that once served the Princes Risborough line. On the upside is Aylesbury North Box, which controlled access to the goods yard. We're heading north along the Vale of Aylesbury to Quainton Road, where three railways met: the Metropolitan, the Brill Tramway and the Great Central's London extension. The Brill Tramway once curved away to the left and is now home of the Buckinghamshire Railway Centre. The station lost its passenger service in 1963. Just north of the station, the lifted cord down to Verney Junction is seen at bridge number 572. Stopping here in the snowy winter of 1963, signs of previous ownership were still evident. Local wildlife was having a difficult time of it, but the station was still open for another month. The Brill branch yard was in use for wagon storage, but the upyard still looked very busy. Local passenger services between Aylesbury and Nottingham were withdrawn from March 1963, together with closure of some intermediate stations, including Quainton Road. Woodford Hulse supplied some 264 tanks for the work. Their Fordable 281 stops en route for Woodford in February 1963, just before closure. Freight traffic along the London extension continued until June 1965. Rejoining a semi-fast, we approach Grendon Underwood Junction, where the link to the GWR Birmingham to Paddington main line comes in on our left. This link opened in 1906 for passengers, allowing the GC to avoid congestion south of Aylesbury. Underbridge number 567 and Calvert is approached. The station was a typical Great Central Island design, of which we shall see many more on our journey north. It served the village of Charndon, Calvert being the family name of the local landowner, Sir Harry Verney. The station was another of the March 1963 closures. North of the station was the 1940 connection down to the Oxford to Bletchley line, which the Great Central crossed on Bridge 561. On the 1st of September 1966, a northbound Black 5 crosses Bridge 561 and then Bridge 560 over the road towards Buckingham. At the same spot, Flying Scotsman relives the days when A3s, indeed 4472 herself, regularly hauled expresses like the Master Cutler along this route. An 8F follows on a freight over the bridge, completely demolished after the line's closure. Finmere was the next station. It was more than a mile from the village it served, with a small goods yard mainly for coal and cattle traffic. However, the famous public school Stowe was close, and the beginning and ending of term times were busy. Heading towards Brackley, the LNWR's Banbury to Verney Junction line is crossed at Bridge 532. Brackley Viaduct to 22 Arches crosses the Great Ouse River, and then arrival at Brackley Central. It's the 21st of July 1966 and 44920 arrives from Marylebone. This was filmed from the lay-by on the station approach, built to avoid congestion on the main A43 Oxford to Northampton road above the station. A footbridge had to be built spanning the down line to provide access from the booking hall. 44920 looks eager to leave. Brackley was 59 miles from Marylebone and she had covered this in 1 hour 27 minutes. A reminder of the 1960s period is the chalked inscription on the smokebox door, "Mod Girls Forever." On a wintry Sunday the 17th of February 1963, just before withdrawal of the Sunday services, Leicester's 45335 arrives past the goods shed. We join the train and depart under the A43 road bridge, since demolished, and the cutting filled in for some distance. Bridge number 518 heralds Helmden Station. The LNER renamed it Helmden for Solgrave in 1928. Solgrave Manor near here was the ancestral home of George Washington, first President of the United States. Whether this helped the passenger figures is unknown, but the station closed in March 1963. The pickup goods shunts the yard, this traffic ceasing in November 1964. Even the DMU service could not save the closures. Crossing Helmden Viaduct, the Banbury to Towcester trackbed is seen before approaching Culworth Junction. Here the line to Banbury GWR joined. Very soon, the trackbed of the spur from the Stratford-upon-Avon and Midland Junction line arrived from the west, which was abandoned in the 1920s. But although the main SMJ link to Woodford Halse still survived at this time, it was disused. Arrival at Woodford Halse. A consoling notice has been posted, but by September the 3rd, 1966, no tickets of any kind would be issued here. Tyslers 45292 departs Woodford Halse with a full head of steam. The Stratford and Midland Junction Railway provided an important link for freight traffic. In 1962, it was still carrying up to 50,000 tonnes of freight a week. A farewell special ran to Woodford by this route on the 24th of April 1965. The train stopped at Byfield to view the two industrial engines, which once worked the ironstone quarries here, an important source of revenue to the line. F44188 was shedded at Bescot at this time. The tour heads towards Woodford Halse. There was still about 18 months' life left for the GC route through Woodford Halse, and, amid scenes of mass trespass, even the signal posts appear not to be out of bounds. 44188 goes off to turn. Henry Fowler designed the 4Fs, and the first was built at Derby in 1911. 192 were built by the Midland Railway, and the LMS continued with the design until 1941. They came from outside builders as well as LMS workshops. 44188 was one of 60 built at St Rollox, Glasgow. The tour was returning to Birmingham. It takes the curve westward, from Woodford Halse North Junction to West Junction. Banbury was served by the Great Central line from Culworth Junction and used intensively by freight and passenger trains from the North East region through to the Midlands and the South Coast. 7918 Rosewood Hall arrives on the daily Bournemouth to York train. This train had left Bournemouth at 10:45. 4 hours later and it's at Banbury. Engines were changed here, and it will be another 4 3/4 hours before passengers see York via the GC and Nottingham. The Grange runs through before 7918 can run right to the shed south of the station. She passes 6904 Charfield Hall on station pilot duties, 1 white light and 1 red on her buffer beam. 6951 Impney Hall reverses onto its train, the opposite working of the York-Bournemouth. The carriage stock used was supplied by the northeastern and southern region for the two trains daily. Note the bullied third brake vehicle 3983 at the head of the train, first entering traffic in 1950. With some of its far leaving via the rear damper, 6951 gets underway southbound. As the last Western 460s were all withdrawn at the end of 1965, the summer of 1966 saw black fives in use south of Banbury, often as far as Bournemouth on the York trains. Banbury's 45493 backs on with a splash. She awaits a 2:38 p.m. departure, and Tysley's 44780 arrives from the south. Another Banbury resident, 44710, has a transfer freight through the station. Hardly recognisable from the preserved locomotive we know today, 92203 arrives to take water. Just look at that pipework along the boiler, wagging in the breeze. It includes the brake ejector pipe to the smoke box. The pipes were normally under a metal cover the length of the boiler. 92203 was shedded at Banbury at this time. On closure of the shed in October 1966, she was transferred to Birkenhead, but almost immediately went to Crewe for her last overhaul. At the beginning of 1966, Banbury had 17 Class 9s on its books. 92030 was one of them. The metal cladding mentioned earlier can be seen clearly on this one. The only change noticeable is a bent handrail on the smoke deflector. This time the engine does not take water and departs with a lot less fuss than 92203. Moving down to the shed, two 9Fs arrive. The first is 92162, a single chimneyed version with a BR1C tender, carrying 9 tons of coal and 4,725 gallons of water. She eventually had a 10-year life, being withdrawn in November 1967. Next up is double-chimneyed 92213, a Banbury engine at this time. Built for the Western region, this one has a BR1G tender with 7 tons of coal and 5,000 gallons of water. Her lifespan was 7 years. It's Thursday, September the 29th, 1966, and the shed will close in a few days' time. but by the coal stage is 92228, which came new to Banbury in July 1958. The coal stage was double-sided, over which was situated a 45,000-gallon water tank. The Churchwood-style shed opened in 1908, replacing a single road building of 1889. By 1910, the complement was about 40 engines, explained by the opening of the Great Central connection to Woodford Hulse. By this time, all Western power had gone, and less than a handful of locomotives were in steam. In July 1966, a surprise arrival was 46522 to take over the diesel shunters work at Banbury until the October, and she worked trip freights to Adderbury and Bletchington cement sidings. Banbury Shed was given responsibility for powering the GC's Nottingham to Marylebone services after Woodford Hulse Shed closed. In 1966, these were Black 5s. Visiting 8Fs were also present. They had replaced the Western 280 freight engines. Another common sight around this time, the 21st of July 1966, was privately preserved 7029 Cluncastle, which was working the 825 Bawdsley to Banbury pickup freight and return. She ran bereft of name and number plates, of course, in this period of increasing theft of collectible items. But it brought back a bit of the old Western days at Banbury, when many of her class passed through on the Paddington to Birmingham line. Returns to Tyseley with myself and Pat Whitehouse on the footplate. The shed closed in October 1966, although some facilities stayed on until early 1967. Banbury Station was rebuilt in 1958 with reinforced concrete as seen here. Slowly arriving along number 2 platform is 6957 Norcliffe Hall. She will come off here. Passes the upyard with its cattle pen and coal yard. In 1966, diesels from the north were still replaced by steam to work to the southern region via Oxford and Basingstoke. Brush Type 4D1541 was from Sheffield Tinsley and not quite 3 years old. She continued in service for another 21. Behind is 45132, a Shrewsbury engine being given a day out to the seaside. Behind her is the former upyard being flattened by a roller. Once there was a connecting line here to the LMS Banbury Merton Street station, which had services to Verney Junction and Bletchley, passing under the GC at Brackley. As 45132 backs down, D1541 runs back to the north end of the station for train 1N83, the opposite South Coast train to Newcastle via Sheffield. 45222 runs to the north end also. She was no stranger to the southern trains, as in June 1953 she was one of several Black Fives transferred there on the temporary total withdrawal of Merchant Navy Pacifics due to axle box troubles. Another Black 5 reverses into number 4 bay platform. Behind is number 5 platform on a through loop which came into being on the reconstruction of the station. This was the site of the Woodford Bay platform for services to the GC. 45308 departs. We return to the Great Central. The route diverged east at Banbury Junction, where the Oxfordshire Ironstone Company's line also met the GWR route from their quarries. These closed in September 1967. Once there were two intermediate halts on the line, Chalcombe Road Platform and Iden Road Halt, both closed in 1956. As seen earlier, the Banbury line rejoined the Great Central Main Line at Culworth Junction. We are back on a GC train in the winter of 1963 arriving at Woodford House. A freight waits to come off the Stratford line and an 08 is shunting in a number 4 box at North Junction. 45335 takes water, and on this bitter day the stove by the water column is smoking well to keep it from freezing up. Probably Charwelton troughs are frozen. At this time the shed was still busy, 2 years to go. The yards were also full of wagons, for here, alongside the main line, were the wagon repair shops. A 264 tank shunts the down yard and we arrive at Charwelton. A horse speeds through at a Dowd Express from the south coast, which it will work as far as Leicester. A 9F on a wind cutter or runner heads south for Woodford Halse Yards. Connected to Charwelton Goods Yard was the Ironstone line of the Parkgate Iron and Steel Company. Closed in 1961, it was worked by number 8, a Yorkshire Engine Company 040 of 1905. Catesby Tunnel, at nearly 3,000 yards, burrowed under Catesby House, which had once belonged to one of the participants of the gunpowder plot. The line fell on a gradient of 1 in 176 towards Staverton Road. A 9F heads over the A425 Leamington to Daventry Road. The first major town north of Aylesbury and Brackley is Rugby and is approached through Dunsmuir Cutting. The name of Central is not applicable to its position in the town. It was situated in Hillmorton Road and was the usual GC Island type with booking hall above. The station did have a goods yard and warehouse and sidings to hold freight while passenger trains passed. A local service operated to Nottingham, and these were known to GC men as Ords. In July 1962, Colix L1 67797 has arrived on the 7:40 AM from Nottingham. The return working was at 9:55, which would soon go over to diesel haulage. The L1s were also known as Stortford Pacifics, as on suburban trains around London they did half their duties running bunker first. 67797 was withdrawn in October 1962. A WD heads north. Rugby Central survived after the closure of the main line south of here towards Marylebone in 1966, and a DMU service to Nottingham continued until May 1969, when the station closed for good. We depart in happier times. North of Rugby, the GC crossed the West Coast Main Line by a girder bridge. There were 14 tracks to be crossed, and there was a good view of the LMS shed underneath. Metropolitan locos were also present waiting to be scrapped. 7 miles from Rugby Central was Lutterworth. These scenes were taken some 6 years before closure, as it survived for the DMU service north of Rugby until May 1969. A housing estate now covers the area where York's B1 61018 GNU heads south. Another southbound parcel's working with a V2. On the 18th of August 1966, 45222 arrives on a local working, another ord, for 5:31 p.m. to Nottingham, which had started at Rugby at 5:20. The station was accessed from below by a stairway. The train leaving behind 45267 is the 238X Marleybone on the 11th of August 1966, with me on the extreme right making a tape recording. The M1 motorway north to Leicester was completed in 1965. Fine views of steam at speed could now be obtained from a fast car north of Lutterworth. This is 45222 on the 11th of August on the 520X Rugby. A cutting heralds the approach to Ashby Magna by the 88-yard Ashby Tunnel. Having exited Ashby Tunnel, 44984 approaches the station, which was under Bridge 413, carrying the road between the villages of Ashby Magna and Dunton Bassett. The signal box once controlled fairly extensive sidings for coal and cement traffic. On closure of the through route, the notice proclaims the station will become unstaffed. The motorway runs alongside the station. We continue along the M1 motorway, viewing a northbound semi-fast, with my father driving and me filming. The GC London extension from Nottingham to Quainton Road was a superb piece of railway, with no gradient steeper than 1 in 176 and no curve less than 1 mile radius. In fact, the sharpest curve was near Whetstone and Cosby. It was known as Cosby Corner by GC railwaymen. The motorway was crossed at the north end of the curve, south of Cosby, as the railway approaches Leicester. Next, Whetstone Station, and at Leicester South Goods Junction, the Leicester Central Shed is passed on the east side. The gantry is over Wells Street Bridge as we run into Leicester Central Station. The fireman goes off to the bookstall for an evening paper. The 520 from Rugby Central arrived here at 5:54. Departing the up platform is the 5:15 from Nottingham, away at the same time for Marleybone. The station was of the island type, without a platforms up and down, and 2 double-track bays at either end. 44941 leaves on the ord from Rugby on the 16th of June 1966. On departing, the Great Central Hotel prominently displays itself, but it was not owned by the railway. It no longer exists, just like the station site, which is an industrial estate, although the station office building survives. The departing train heads out across Northgate Street, and just visible is Leicester Passenger North Box. The GC coal yards at Abbey Lane were serving the Esso Company, and tanks were worked to and from Fawley near Southampton. Next station was Belgrave and Birstall, now Leicester North on the preserved Great Central Railway, and then Rothley and bridge number 354. Swithlin Reservoir was owned by Leicester Corporation Waterworks. After Quorn, we approach Loughborough Central. The station, of course, still survives, being the headquarters of the Preservation Company. Today their loco shed is just beyond the bridge in the distance. Crossing the Midland Main Line, and then the Falcon Works of the Brush Loco Company, which was connected to the Midland Line. The summit is reached at Barnston Tunnel, and then the line drops towards Eastleigh and Nottingham. The area produced calcium sulphate deposits to make plaster of Paris, and the goods yard on the upside was used for products of a gypsum works at Gotham. 45222 departs on a loco service to Nottingham on the 18th of August 1966. Ruddington had a large MOD ordnance depot, and there was a brickworks at Wilford before crossing the River Trent on bridge number 289. Then Arkwright Street Station, crossing the Midland Railway again, and Weekday Cross Junction, where the Great Northern Line from Grantham joins for the run into Nottingham Victoria. Nottingham Victoria took 3 years to build. The site covered 12 acres, and much housing, albeit in a poor district, was swept away. The dominant feature of the station was the 120-foot high tower. The 4 clock faces had a balcony beneath each, and a pediment stone. The station was a joint one for the Great Central and Great Northern Railways, as seen on the gates. The frontage, of French Renaissance style, was 250 feet. Interesting prices for travel, although Birmingham would necessitate the use of the Midland route via Derby. The GC would have liked to have called the station Central, but this was not acceptable to the Great Northern. A compromise was reached, however, in the name Victoria, to commemorate the Queen, on whose birthday the station was opened on the 24th of May 1900. Or was that really just a coincidence? B2s were common on the route until the early 1960s. Later appearances were down to visiting members of the class from York. This is 60847 St Peter's School, York, in February 1963. B1 served to the end in 1966. This is Collick 61141, although she was withdrawn in July 1965. The line to Sheffield Victoria was built by the Manchester, Sheffield and Lincoln Railway, later Great Central. Hucknall Central was opened as Hucknall Town in 1899 when the London extension was built. It was the first station south of Annesley built to the GC standard design. Hollingwell and Annesley Station was situated near Annesley Yards, in the centre of the Nottinghamshire coalfield. Departing here, we see Annesley North Junction Box before entering the 1,000-yard Annesley Tunnel. After the tunnel was Kirkby South Junction, where the Great Northern Line to Langwith Junction came in. The line served many collieries like Tibshelf and Pilsley, and exchange yards at Heath. Grassmore was an intermediate station on the Chesterfield Loop. The remains of the viaduct of the Lancashire, Derbyshire and East Coast Line from Lincoln to Chesterfield Marketplace are seen, before diving under the Midland Railway into Chesterfield. Chesterfield was also served by the Midland Railway and had a shed south of the town at Hasland. It was a roundhouse and serviced mainly freight locomotives. Closure came in 1964 and at the end was in a very run-down condition. The Great Central gained access to Manchester from Sheffield by the famous Woodhead route, electrified by 1954. It was opened by the Sheffield, Ashton-under-Lyme and Manchester Railway, incorporated into the Manchester, Sheffield and Lincoln, which some speculators called the money sunk and lost. The steeply graded route eventually closed in 1981. The line was electrified at 1500-volt DC overhead. The locomotives were classified EM1, later BR Class 76, although 7 EM2s were also built for passenger use. Their services ended at the close of 1969, after which mineral traffic sustained the line until 1981. Two Class 76 locomotives head eastwards, through Penistone, the junction for the Lancashire and Yorkshire's line to Huddersfield. The heaviest trains utilise the Class 76 running in pairs. An economical factor in the haulage by electric traction was the use of regenerative braking, whereby on the long descents, substantial amounts of current was put back into the electric wires to be used by the locomotives on the uphill sections. There were 3 Woodhead tunnel bores. The final one was double track, seen here at Woodhead Station at the western end. The original 2 bores, opened in 1845 and 1852 respectively, are behind this train, filmed in the 1950s when the locos were in black livery and the coaches in carmine and cream. But we return to Chesterfield on the 17th of February 1963. Sheffield Darnold 61044 arrives southbound. Today, this is the site of the A61 in a relief road of the town. At Nottingham Victoria, a train is departing into Mansfield Road Tunnel northbound towards Sheffield. The down freight for Annesley Yards, behind 45222, gets the right of way towards the tunnel on a rising grade of 1 in 132. Kirkby's 8F48282 hears the sound of the gong inside the tunnel to show the signal is clear past the 87 lever Nottingham North box. This view of the south end of Victoria shows a DMU in the up bay platform, while a Black 5 is on the centre through road. In 1965, there were 3 ups semi-fast from Nottingham to Marylebone, the 8:15, 12:25 and 5:15 p.m. Waiting in platform 10 is Collex 44847. Before we depart, a grubby 48507 passes through tender first for Annesley Yards on the 16th of June 1966. We depart towards the bridge under Parliament Street and pass Victoria's South signal box. The fireman looks back to check the train is following correctly. The station closed in September 1967 and became the Victoria Shopping Centre. The only thing surviving is the clock tower. At Weekday Cross, the line headed out over viaducts until crossing the Midland Main Line on a girder bridge. Just south of the bridge was Arkwright Street Station, where services lasted until May 1969 on the truncated GC from Rugby Central. Then out of the city, alongside the River Trent to East Leek. The line climbs southwards to the 110-yard Barnston Tunnel, the summit of the line between Nottingham and Loughborough. Over the Midland Station at Loughborough and into Central, past the goods shed on the western. Departing south from Loughborough, the line goes under Beech's Road Bridge, number 334, and 10 miles further on enters Leicester Central. The water tanks are linked by pipe, enabling twice the water capacity of one tank to be taken at one column if necessary. 44835 arrives. The loading of parcels traffic takes place. The station area was taken over by industrial units on closure. On the sunny evening of June the 16th, 1966, Collex Black 544936 has an Oxford University Railway Society headboard on as she leaves for Marylebone on the last through train of the day. Heading out over Wells Street, past Leicester Passenger South Box. The loco shed at Leicester GC closed in July 1964. The coal stage, known locally as Hungry Hill, was still standing. We are speeding through Whetstone Station before crossing the unopened, newly constructed M1 motorway. Bridge 413 heralds Ashby Magna Station. Even the semi-fast stopped here and faced a restart for up trains on a 1 in 176 gradient, although this would not cause a problem. My father is standing on land once used for the upsidings, some of which also gave way to the construction of the motorway. 44811 departs by a tall starter with repeater arm, handy for sighting when approaching under the bridge. It's the 11th of August 1966. South through Ashby Tunnel to Lutterworth. The goods yard has now been closed and lifted. Behind the lorry can be seen the former station master's house. On the platform, the gents, corrugated iron cycle shed, the waiting room and canopied ticket office. Commuters from Leicester D-train. Rugby Central Station under Bridge 455, Hillmorton Road. In June 1962, Annesley received 4 Britannias. 70014 Iron Duke arrives at Rugby. They had come from Neasden on that shed's closure, where apparently they were not liked. But Annesley crews took to them and kept them reasonably clean. Iron Duke still carried the fixing bolts on the deflectors for attaching the arrows when allocated to Stuart's Lane up to 1958 on the Golden Arrow train. But at the end it was all down to black fives. It's 7:30 p.m. on the 16th of June 1966 and 44835 has just arrived on the evening 3-coach order from Nottingham, which she will now run round and take back as empty stock to Leicester. Woodford halts towards the end of the GC. Looking north, the platform on the downside handled local trains to Banbury until 1964. Panning around towards the loco shed, which was once so busy, is now closed. Collex 44941 arrives on the 5:15 p.m. from Nottingham. Passing Culworth Junction for Banbury. Brackley Central was approximately halfway between Nottingham and Marylebone. As we run in, the lift tower is seen for transferring heavy loads to platform level. Loughborough and Nottingham had lifts also. Annesley's 9Fs for the wind cut of freights were occasionally put on the semi-fasts. On Thursday, the 6th of September 1962, 92091 calls at Brackley. Arriving at Brackley on the 5:15 p.m. from Nottingham, the fireman is fast off the mark to take water. This, of course, was freely available at main stations on the GC at the end, but coal was another matter, and the engines were always well filled with it, as there were no facilities at Marylebone towards the end, and it was a 260-mile round trip. South of the station, a train crosses the 22-arch Brackley Viaduct over the Great Ouse on the 1st of September 1966. Southbound at Finmere in September 1962. Once a slipcoach service was provided here. Compare the scene 4 years later, with signal box and station buildings all demolished. Overbridge 561, with an Oxford to Bletchley DMU passing underneath, and on our left, the cord from that line at Claydon Junction joins the GC line just north of Calvert Station. Four-car DMU gives Calvert a miss on its way to Marylebone in the winter of 1963. The station was about to close in the March. A standard Class 5 has a stopping service, unoored in early 1963. Woodford and Leicester Sheds still had an allocation of this class at the time. Diesel locomotives were never widely seen south of Woodford. Sulzer engine Type 2s did make forays to Calvert and the cord towards Bletchley. This cord did survive the closure in September 1966 north of Aylesbury for containerised rubbish trains terminating here. At the time of the filming, the 1st of September 1966, the yards at Finmere were still busy with local brick traffic. An English Electric heads north at Finmere and takes the line down to Claydon Junction and on towards Bletchley. At Quainton Road, the trackbed of the former Aylesbury and Buckingham Railway, later Metropolitan, comes in on our left from Verney Junction, track lifted in 1946, before heading through the station. A mile to the south was Waddesdon Station, a small halt which served the Metropolitan Railway. It closed in the 1930s. We have returned to Aylesbury, which is today's limit of the services from Marylebone over the former Metropolitan and Great Central Joint Line. Catching up with 92091 seen earlier at Brackley Central, we can see the excellent acceleration of these powerful machines as she leaves for Marylebone. We're on a DMU along the Prince's Risborough branch. First stop was South Aylesbury, followed by Little Kimble, the only intermediate station on the branch opened in 1863. The other stops were halts. South Aylesbury opened in 1933 and Monks, Risborough and Whiteleaf in 1929. The main Paddington to Birmingham Great Western line was reached at Prince's Risborough. The return journey is made branching northeast at Prince's Risborough North Junction. Back at Aylesbury in the pouring rain, a standard mogul awaits the road south, while a J39 64727 from Woodford Pulse passes by. She was withdrawn in October 1962. The 5:15 p.m. from Nottingham waits time. The train had a 4-minute stop here, and the opportunity was taken to stoke up the fire for the 7-mile climb through the Chilterns to south of Wendover. The engine is 44941, and the efforts of the firemen look quite spectacular, even if the pollution is a bit strong. After the 500-foot summit is encountered at Dutchlands, it's downhill to Great Missenden. Another 500-foot summit is encountered at Amersham, before a drop at 1 in 109 through Chalfont. Following London Transport's Metropolitan line, we reach Neasden, where the Altys depot houses ex-GWR pannier tanks. 44941 is at Neasden Junction, with the line from Grendon Underwood and Northolt junctions coming in for the final run into Marylebone. 44847 ends its 3-hour, 10-minute journey from Nottingham in December 1965. 9 months later, 44984 would bring in the last service train and return with the 10:45 p.m. to Nottingham and Manchester. The Great Central has not quite gone completely. Preservation has stepped in, and at Quainton Road, where the London extension ended its quest for the capital, the London Railway Preservation Society set up in 1968. Open days were organised, and steam reappeared using a collection of unique steam engines, giving passenger rides from the Wotton tramway platform. One of the locomotives preserved here was BT Welltank 0314, built in 1874 for the London and South Western Railway. Her BR number was 30585, and she worked at Wadebridge. The link with the GC here is the coach behind the engine, which was Manchester, Sheffield and Lincoln number 1076, the 6-wheeled third-class carriage. But at Loughborough, in January 1969, the Main Line Preservation Group was formed to preserve a double-track section between Leicester and Nottingham. They took out a lease on the Loughborough Central Station site, and by 1973 were running trains. This view in 1975 shows 1922-built Littleton No. 5 on a service to Quorn on the double track. The down line was lifted by BR in 1976. At Quorn and Woodhouse, the former goods yard was used as a car park at the terminus of the line from Loughborough. Littleton No. 5 approaches the crossover, which allowed engines to run round at this station. The pointwork was manually operated, as the signal box at the south end of the station had gone. The station was in good order, with the general and ladies' waiting room and the gents' toilet beyond that. Emerging from Bridge 337, which carries the A6 trunk road into Loughborough, is 45231. The date is the 9th of January 1977, and the down line has been lifted. 45231 had inaugurated the services in September 1973. By now the trains ran through to Roseley. The Gresley Buffet car is 1937 built 9124. Over the years, many mainline locomotives have been on what has now become the Great Central Railway Company 1976 plc. Of LNER interest have been 506 Butler Henderson, Gresley N24744 and Thompson B1 1306. Crossing Swithland Reservoir is 506, built in 1919 for the Great Central, and a more appropriate locomotive on this preserved railway available today cannot be imagined. So next time you're travelling north up the M1 approaching Leicester, look over to the west. and perhaps you will see the ghost of a Black 5, silhouetted against the setting sun, racing towards you. On the 23rd of July 1966, with 6 weeks to go, 45324 departs Marylebone. The spirit of the Great Central was drawing to a close. In this film, we hope we preserve some of its great charm, rather than gone completely.